So I'm Lesley, I'm the lead psychologist for the Better Together project. And I'm a consultant clinical psychologist. I'm also a mindfulness teacher, so I can combine all of those elements. And this evening, what we're going to do first off is actually we're going to start with me sharing my slides. Yeah, and 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 some of I hope that what I've got to say is familiar to all of you. This bit, most certainly, because this is the bit that we all share, okay? And this is what I'll be explaining is the idea of what this jigsaw represents and how mindfulness comes in to actually help us resolve what happens when the jigsaw that you have been building and piecing together and arranging throughout your life, a physical condition comes in as it is. If you see my hands come in underneath a beautiful picture jigsaw and then throws it up in the air. And all the pieces, all the things that you've worked hard at, all the where you progressed in your profession, your friendships, your relationships, your leisure time, all sorts of things that have really been important to you and have been part of this amazing jigsaw of your life. The condition has just kind of basically sent everything up in the air, spilling around. But mindfulness can be one of the strategies, one of the techniques, one of the approaches that you can use to help those pieces settle down and find order again. So often is the idea of the health condition is throwing it up in the air and the pieces come down and they may not be in exactly the same place as previously, but you have been able to, in as considered way as possible, piece a life together again that matters to you. And what I've found over the years, not just within the Better Together project, but really over my 30 odd years now as a psychologist, is that mindfulness can play a part in terms of helping you to piece those jigsaw puzzles back together again in the most methodical, the most responsive, and the most careful way. Okay, so that's why I'm offering this today, and with the hope that you'll join the course on the 27th as well. So so building on this, right? What I wanted to do was actually invite you to use your phones, and I'll get my phone as well. And if you haven't got access to your phone, then just stay with us on this one because I'll give you the link so that you can do this at a separate time. But if you hold your phone up to the screen, yeah, and open your camera app. Okay. So just like you would when we had to, in COVID times, register to go into places. Yeah. You should see on your phone, right? And please do shout up if it's not working, right? But you should see on your phone a screen that says understanding your current level of stress is the first step in taking control. And what and what I'm going to invite you to do is just press start. And what you're going to do is go through a series of 10 questions, which only you will know the answer, which will give you an idea of your stress levels at the moment. Okay, so I'm going to do this too, and I scored highly this morning. Yes. As you can hear, I've got a flu bug, and I didn't know whether my voice would hang out for tonight, but it's here, and my head's here, so we'll carry on, and hopefully I won't be too disruptive to you all. But what we've got in front of you are 10 questions. And I just want you to, as much as with your gut response as possible, just tick each of the 10 questions, right? So I won't go through each question, but just so that you know where to start. The first one is in the last month, how often have you, and the question is, been upset because of something that's happened unexpectedly? So that is your first question. And you just choose whichever of the answers is right for you. And then move through. And I'll give you about 3 minutes, 4 minutes, because it shouldn't take too long. I want you just to go with your gut reaction on them. And you don't have to tell me the score at the end at all. At that point, we'll go on to another exercise where you will be able to anonymously put your score onto the screen. So if you just work your way through, that'd be grand. I hope everybody is progressing okay for people. I can't actually see you at the moment, so I don't know whether there's any confusion. If there is, then just put your hand up and Vicky will respond. So when you come, I'm not suggesting you are at the end of your 10 questions yet, but once you come to the end of your 10 questions, you press next, and that will give you your stress score. Okay. And what I'm going to do is stop sharing for the moment because I think everybody should have been able to. So has everybody been able to do that exercise?
Yeah.
Okay, right. So my stress score isn't actually as high as it was earlier today, which is reassuring. So but basically what the research says is that if you use mindfulness, you can reduce your stress score by 40%, right? And so yeah, if you scroll down a wee bit, right, it shows you below what your stress score is, how much lower it can become if you actually use mindfulness. So this is a bit this is a bit gimmicky, but no less based on research. Yeah. So what I wanted to do now was actually, again, it's anonymized, so don't feel uncomfortable about doing this. But I'm going to put up another screen, right, whereby we can then using the QR code, another one, we can then get the access to build a word cloud. And some of you, I know Sarah will have done it, and I know Vicky will have done it before. But I'll explain that when I bring that up. So bear with me. Thanks for doing that bit so far. Okay. Just a minute. All right. Oh, sorry, just a second. I just need to bring it up. Right. Okay, so what you'll see now is another QR code, right? So if you take your camera over that QR code, If you take your camera over that QR code, then what you'll have in front of you, it says what was your stress score. So you only need to use one of those slots and basically add in what it was. So I've just added mine in, right? And nobody will be able to identify it, okay? Even though there's only a small number of us, we won't be able to identify it. Only you will know what your score is. But it's just so that we can see what the spread is. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is actually move us to a different screen, right? I don't know what you can see at the moment. Can you see numbers coming up or not?
Yep. Yes, can see the result.
Yeah, you can. Oh, that's good. So I'll flag that I was 23, right? This morning I was 31, right? And it's not meant to change that much in a day, so I don't know what was going on. But anyway, what we can see are just a range of numbers, and in actual fact, from my understanding, we're all sitting really within, let me see,
Okay.
yeah, kind of, we're all sitting in the kind of moderate range, aren't we? Oh, well, apart from the person who's 26, you've just hit into the more severe end. But the idea is that I'm going to put to you is that if you practice mindfulness more within your day, then the potential to be able to bring those stress levels down by about 40% increases. Okay. So, sorry. So does that surprise anybody? The levels of stress that are there?
No.
Is anybody?
Not
No,
really.
not really.
I think I probably expected it to be higher.
Did you?
Yeah, I was quite surprised when it was moderate. Yeah, I expected higher figures there.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
quite comforting.
yeah. So, what I'll do is sometimes the it's interesting to actually reflect on our stress levels, because sometimes we can feel way more stress than in actual fact, when we look at it, we're actually more balanced. And that doesn't discount those kind of moments of stress at all, but it helps to remind us of what's there within our resilience. So what I'm going to do now is move our way through the PowerPoint screen and start to unpack around mindfulness, right? And just need to, yeah, in that. Okay. Okay, so because one of the things which I'm aware of through my work with people who are having to adapt to acute and chronic conditions is that sometimes things can feel so overwhelming that at any one time during the day, it can feel as if our thoughts are this tangled mess of of extraordinary things going through our heads, and they may even be habitual patterns of unhelpful thinking that at any one point we can feel that we're being swept away by, or indeed our actions are being driven by. And this kind of tangled array that you've got there around this little figure are also potentially overwhelming emotions that we can feel during the day, or kind of grumbling, difficult emotions, which really we would prefer not to have alongside. Or we can feel that we've got these tricky body sensations, and that I'm not meaning just psychological sensations, but very much kind of body sensations which are to do with pain or with discomfort or abdominal discomfort or something like that. And we can just feel like we're being ricocheted all over the place, being kind of taunted by the future and our worries about the future, but also haunted by the past, and not actually in the midst of that, not really being able to enjoy the present, and what's good and what's meaningful and potentially joyful in the present. And so what mindfulness does, it helps to kind of untangle all of those extraordinary overwhelming emotions, body sensations and thoughts. And what it does, I'll just run through this. So that what is mindfulness, how it helps, but also and then go on to some of the simple things that we can do to add to your day from today. All right. And so let's start with what is mindfulness. Well, what we've already established is that whatever your stress level, if you practice mindfulness, you can bring it down by about 40%, right? And it is not, I've chose this particular picture on purpose because it's not being able to kind of sit in a lotus position like a pretzel. Not at all. It's not about doing something that's out of the ordinary. It's not wacky. It's not odd. It's got a huge research evidence base to show that it can be helpful in terms of people managing chronic and acute pain, any physical symptoms that are to do with medical conditions. It can help people with sleeplessness. It can help people with fears about the future, or indeed it can help people become adjusted and tolerant of things that have happened in the past. But most of all, it actually helps us to actually really engage with our lives and live it fully with all of our body, right? The other thing that it does is it helps us to, and this is an expression that I use, and I hope this makes sense, it helps us to relate to life differently, to relate to our thoughts differently, to relate to our emotions differently, to relate to the world differently and what the world is doing around us, to relate to that differently, all with the idea of finding balance. Right. It's not about making everything this hunky-dory kind of Pollyanna world where we're just thinking good thoughts all the time at all. It's not about that. It's always about finding balance and finding a way in which we can pause to respond to whatever's happening in life rather than be swept away by difficult emotions. And that pause I will be talking about in loads of ways as we go through the rest of the session. And this is the key slide in terms of the idea of pausing. Mindfulness provides the opportunity and trains us up to be even more able to pause in the middle of the maelstrom of life, to pause, to choose how to respond to whatever is happening to us, aligned with our values rather than react. Okay. And rather than react driven by difficult emotions. What we're looking for is that idea of pausing so that we can respond in a considered way rather than react in a knee-jerk way. Okay? And that cuts across every element of our lives. It can be in the moment. It could be, I knew that I suddenly was going to have a bout of coughing earlier on. Just earlier on, it seems to have settled at the moment. But I could have got quite reactive there in terms of, oh my God, this is awful. This is really disturbing everybody. But that would not have helped me. That would have just made me more tense and more potential to cough. So what I had to do was just kind of slow myself down, slow my breathing down, be very mindful of my body, mindful of what was important, what was of value to me, which was to actually present this webinar to you. And in doing so, I was using mindfulness techniques and with little pauses in between just to settle myself. And I'm sure when we have the opportunity to chat at the end with question and answers, that others will recognize this. So it can be in the moment, or it could be pause to choose how to respond, align with your values rather than react to bigger dilemmas, right? So that might be treatment decisions. It may be family circumstance, but this idea of mindfulness is very much this. It's not about slowing down necessarily. It's just being more considered in terms of how you approach whatever's happening in your life, because we can't choose what happens to us, even though we would love to think that we can. We can't often. I mean, we're limited in what choice we have. We can't choose what life throws at us, but we can choose how to respond to it. Okay. So the other thing about pauses, which is really important to me, and I often I either see this during my day or I have it on a sheet of paper in front of my laptop, and it's just some words from Albert Einstein, basically saying, he was saying of himself, I think 99 times and find nothing. So if you drive yourself to think, you find nothing. But if I stop thinking, swim in silence, then the truth comes to me. And basically, it's one of the most mindful kind of quotes you could come across. It's not that he stops thinking, right? But he stops trying, he stops striving, he stops pushing, and just relaxes into the moment, not grasping on how things should be or would be or want them to be, but just relax into that moment, swim kind of in a very fluid way in the silence, and then an answer will come. Okay. So that's just that quote is just so important to me in terms of, I think it really illustrates what happens to me during the day. Sometimes if I'm sitting with somebody and really overwhelmed with their situation, or potentially overwhelmed by just the horridness of their situation, if I start kind of getting anxious about trying to find a solution, that solution will not come. But if I settle back and I just allow myself to pause, then potential ideas and options might come to me. Okay. So one of the other things that I wanted to introduce to you, so there won't be too many concepts, right, this evening. But because of my coughing, I decided not to actually do a meditation with you because I couldn't be sure that I'd be able to hold it. So you're getting a little more input than I would normally do. But what I wanted to introduce you to were these 3 circles. And the 3 circles come from a particular approach to therapy called compassion focused therapy. And compassion focused therapy uses mindfulness, and mindfulness uses compassion focused therapy. They rub up against each other. Because where mindfulness sits is in this soothing system, right? But in actual fact, the green soothing system is the approach to life that we actually rarely use, right? Most of the time we're caught in threat by just trying to just kind of just sort life, get through it, just sort it, kind of react, better safe than sorry, detect threat, sort it, protect others, protect myself. And that can be in all sorts of different ways, not necessarily the ways that we would wish. It can be protecting ourselves with anger. It can be protecting ourselves with fear and flight and fleeing or freezing, right? So there's the threat system that's part of the human being, but there's also the drive system. And the drive system is about kind of wanting to protect and to provide, but it can be driven. We can get so caught up in this kind of driven way of approaching life. And often we get caught with a threat with, say, for example, in work, we're worried about our performance figures in work. We drive ourselves further to try and achieve those performance figures. We burn ourselves out. That leaves us feeling more threatened, and round in circles we go. Whereas in actual fact, the whole idea of life is that these 3 systems all have a place. None of them are better or worse than the other. They all have a place. And what's important is that they're in balance, right? But most of the time we inhabit this space. Okay, and that can be in work, it can be at home, it can be in terms of our family relationships. And what we have to do, and what mindfulness does, it brings in this soothing system. It gives us ideas as to how to bring soothing system into our lives. Okay. And that's through basically using those pauses, finding ways in which you can pause and respond to life as you would wish rather than react. And those responses can be looking to connection and care and compassion for others and compassion for ourselves, right? It's very much around managing distress and promoting bonding. And mindfulness techniques are key to that green, right? The green is very much about being out in nature, but not just going for a quick walk around the block with the dog, because with your head going buzz, 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 buzzing. It's about going out there, walking and walking with your whole body, right? But I'll talk more about that in a moment. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll just show you a very, very quick video. And what this video is showing is that frequently we get caught up in our heads. And and that's not always the most useful place to be. And the mindfulness course helps you to get much more of a perspective, a wider perspective on all your thoughts and your feelings, right? So that you can look at them and choose what you want to follow and what you have to be involved in, rather than from them and the midst of them and feeling all entangled in them. And this particular video from Headspace is really helpful in terms of showing that. So I'll just play it now and then talk about it in more detail.
Training the mind is often quite different to how people imagine it to be. Maybe they have an idea it's about stopping thoughts or eliminating feelings, but the reality is a bit different. An easy way to think of it is to imagine yourself sitting on the side of a busy road, the passing cars representing the thoughts and the feelings. All you have to do is to sit there and watch the cars. Sounds easy, right? But what usually happens is that we feel a bit unsettled by the movement of the traffic. So we run out into the road and try and stop the cars, or maybe even chase after a few, forgetting that the idea was to just sit here. And of course, all of this running around only adds to the feeling of restlessness in the mind. So training the mind is about changing our relationship with the passing thoughts and feelings, learning how to view them with a little more perspective. And when we do this, we naturally find a place of calm. Will we sometimes forget the idea of the exercise and become distracted? Of course we will. But as soon as we remember, here we are, back on the side of the road again, just watching the traffic go by, perfectly at ease in both body and mind.
Okay, so go on to next slide. Right, so the idea is that sometimes we can feel so overwhelmed by the thoughts that are going through our minds, and we kind of grasp one or worry about the other or block this or try and stop it or get caught up in chasing some of it, and we're getting really overwhelmed. So this particular cartoon just shows you the idea of what we're moving from is this kind of totally caught up in our thoughts to using mindfulness to actually be much more of an observer of our thoughts. And that can happen. And I can assure you, if you do that 7-8 week course, you will become much more able to kind of observe your thoughts and decide which ones to just put to one side and which ones to follow. And also which ones are actually, they are they're embellished and made bigger by ourselves, right? And I'll just and really appreciating that sometimes we play a role in making things even more difficult than they already are, right? And I say that very, very carefully and not patronizing in any shape or form. That's just the human way. Invariably, there are thinking styles that come to us which actually create additional problems. And what mindfulness can do is help you to spot those thinking styles. They're in everybody, right? Stop those thinking styles or be aware of those thinking styles and actually step away from them. So I'm hoping that the next slide actually shows it. Yeah, it does, right? So what I'm showing here, and it comes from a particular book called Stressless, right? And the thinking errors are things which all human beings are prone to, right? When they're stressed out, they're more likely to fall into some of these traps. Okay, so they're more likely to become overwhelmed and catastrophizing, or they put themselves under this relentless shoulds, musts, or they jump to conclusions, or we filter out the positives. There are extraordinary things that we do. There's black and white thinking. Either I am thin as I would wish to be, or I'm grossly fat. I'm not seeing the in between. And we all know that it's not as rigid as that. So these thinking errors are there within all human beings. And unfortunately, they can make a difficult situation worse, right? So one of the things that mindfulness does is it helps you to notice them. And once you're noticing them, then it gives you the opportunity to step back. Okay. And anybody who's done the mindfulness course will tell you that is true. As soon as you notice these sorts of habits in yourself or in other people, right, you become much more able to realize, oh yeah, that's it happening again. I know that I'm catastrophizing. I'm making something, I'm blowing things out of proportion, right? And the thing is, when awful things have happened to you, then the potential for you to step into the catastrophizing is quite high. Why wouldn't it be? But the important thing is to know when it's a habit, a thought habit, and it isn't actually true. And as I say, mindfulness helps you to do that. So what I wanted to do is teach you a particular exercise, and I'll give you I'll just put myself over here. It's called dropping the anchor, and it's kind of like an amped up pause. So you know how I mentioned pauses at the beginning, like pause to choose how to respond to whatever's happening to you, aligned with what matters to you, rather than react in a very kind of knee-jerk or emotionally driven way. And one of the ways of doing that, which you can take forwards from tonight, and we'll send you the details, is to use what's called dropping the anchor. And then first of all, the acronym is ACE, A-C-E. And first of all, it's to acknowledge the thoughts and feelings that are going through your mind, not try to block them, worried that they'll overwhelm you, but just noticing, I feel, so for me, I feel fearful about my cough. I feel fearful about my voice hanging up. But if I get caught up into that cycle, the potential for my tension to go up and it to cough is quite high. So what I've done in dropping the anchor is just say, acknowledge those fears. No wonder you're fearful. You're doing a webinar. Why wouldn't you be frightened of coughing? Just be acknowledging them. And then C is coming back to your body. And that can be literally in all sorts of different ways, dropping down. And for me, it's inhabiting the body that little more deeply and gathering awareness around my breath and just noticing the breath going in and the breath going out. And nobody knows that. That's just something that I'm doing internally, right? So acknowledging what's unsettling me, coming back into my body, and for me, gathering my awareness around my breath. And then E is to then, once my body has settled, my breath has settled, is then E is to engage in what I wish to do, right? So that's dropping the anchor. And what I'll do now is just show you these. Yeah, so just bring this over here. Oh, sorry. So dropping the anchor, these are just two, they're a PDF that was done by a clinical psychology colleague in North Bristol, down in the south of England, southwest of England. And what he did was he just put dropping the anchor onto a really convenient kind of PDF. And he shows that dropping the anchor, which is a mindfulness technique, that simple thing that I just described to you is mindfulness in action, right? Dropping the anchor is you can help you handle difficult feelings, focus your attention, switch off autopilot, and also get in the way of when our minds start ruminating, right? And the same as I said there, oh yeah, and it's also saying that you can use for flashback, panic attacks, and chronic pain. And you just acknowledge what's going through your head, come back to your body in whichever way works for you. And for me, it was breathing. And then engage in what you're doing. So you'll get, I'll make sure that you have access to the slides so that you can see these. And so the acknowledging is acknowledging all the things that are going on inside of you, whatever's showing up right now. The coming back to your body can be all sorts of different ways that you choose to do. Yeah. And also this kind of engage in what you're doing. Sometimes what helpful is actually, once you've done that breathing exercise, is actually to engage with your surroundings again by doing a 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can touch, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing in your mouth, or that you can taste in your mouth. Okay. So what seems to be a very simple exercise, but in actual fact is extraordinarily helpful in terms of pausing you. And the other thing that I'm going to do is send out to you, because I don't want to do it as a meditation this evening because I will cough, right, is the 5 senses meditation. And I've got it recorded and I can easily get it to each of you as a participant, or we can put it on one of the websites so that you can download it as well. But it's just me taking you through 5 senses meditation, where I invite you to be focused on what you can see, what you can hear, what you can touch, smell, and taste. And it's astonishing. As soon as you start learning how to use that, it becomes a really portable mindfulness technique to use in any situation when you're feeling a bit overwhelmed. Okay. I'll just check. Yeah, sorry. All right. There's just 2 more slides. So we will finish just before 10 to. So one of the things also, which I'll encourage you to do, is, I can't go into too much detail, but you'll learn more about this on the mindfulness course, is an exercise called Heals, which is one that I've adapted slightly from an exercise which was put together by a neuropsychologist called Rick Hanson. So Rick Hanson was I mean, if you wanted to look on him in TED Talks, he's done TED Talks on this subject of negativity bias. But it's the idea that if human beings hadn't had this negativity bias, we wouldn't have evolved, right? So very, very early on in our evolution, we got very good at seeing where the threat is. Right, so we were very good at scanning our environment and responding quickly and effectively to threat, which meant that we didn't get killed, which meant that we could go on and propagate and that's the right word, have children, and so we evolved as a species. And this was all very well back then, where we had lots of physical threat to ourselves and our bodies. But we've killed it. It's stayed with us as human beings. We still have a negativity bias. Given all sorts of situations, invariably, we will see the worst interpretation, right? Sometimes the worst interpretation is pretty spot on, right? And it's pretty kind of accurate. But it's when it just plays out over and over and over again, right? And so what this particular exercise does, it just kind of helps to retrain your brain. So rather than go whoosh and lay down good and strong, difficult and bad memories, which the negativity bias encourages us to do, it encourages to, something wrong happens, we lay it down thick and fast, and we will remember it way quicker than anything that's positive that has ever happened to us, right? So we will remember pain, trauma, pain, trauma, kind of unsettlement, all sorts of, we will remember those things way better than we will remember some of the more pleasant aspects of our lives, right? And that comes from the negativity bias. And it just means that we're prone to be able to, if we sense threat again, is get ourselves activated to kind of manage that threat. But it takes over, right? And this particular exercise helps us to rewire, to retrain our brain, to actually be much more able to see, to pick up pleasant, enriching experiences in our environment and lay those down as good memories, right? But you have to do these 5 things, right? So whenever you notice that you're having a pleasant experience, even if it is so inconsequential, it's like, is this really pleasant? But we have to go for the subtle stuff, right? Not wait for outstanding pleasant experiences. Right the way through the day, there is the potential for being subtle, pleasant experiences. It could simply be the sun on your face, or finding a pack of tissues when you needed to blow your nose. I mean, It can be anything, right? That's suddenly, oh my goodness, that's fallen into place. That's pleasant. So you notice that you're having it. You enrich it by actually, say, for example, if it's the sun on your face, it's actually being aware of that, not just with what you can see, but the heat on your face, any sounds that are around you at that time, any other sensations that are going on in your body. You really enrich it by really kind of just using your whole body to experience it. And you absorb it. You stay with that pleasant experience for not just that kind of transitory, oh, the sun's on my face. It's more a kind of give it some time so that you're absorbing it. And then you link it to other experiences. Like, say, for example, other times where you've just been lying there in this warmth with the sun on your face. And then you share it, because the sharing actually brings joy to other people. And that is hugely important. And this is a mindfulness exercise. It is so absolutely core to mindfulness. It's taking that time to notice an experience, enrich it with all your body sensations, take time to absorb it, and then link it to other times where it's happened. And then the communal part of it is sharing it, because that's just sharing this infectious kind of, oh yeah, I remember when that was happening to me. Okay. So that's called heals. Okay. And okay, right. The last thing that I wanted to say about mindfulness is that sometimes it can feel counterintuitive. It's like, and what you see there is what's called a Chinese finger trap, right? And if you've ever held one of these, what happens is you're meant to shove your fingers in, okay? So you shove your fingers in there, and then I say, now take your fingers out. And look what happens. They don't come out, right? Because as soon as you start pulling, the way that the tube is woven means that it's stronger in its grip. Okay. And so what I mean by leaning in and turning towards it, sometimes mindfulness encourages you actually to do what's counterintuitive. It encourages you to look, to actually move into things which are tricky, right? So that, because with the Chinese finger trap, the only way out of that trap is not keep pulling, not keep struggling, not keep wishing it were different and thinking, oh my God, let me get out of here. It's actually to move your fingers and move into the trap, so that it actually widens and you can get your fingers out. Okay. So that's what I mean, that sometimes mindfulness I'll teach you definitely on the course, I'll teach you enough mindfulness so you feel fine to actually start turning towards things which are tricky and finding resolution. Because sometimes if we keep pulling away from something and wishing something were different, that's not the answer. We actually have to move in and see what choices that we have and where we can respond to life a little differently. So you might have heard my husband coughing in the background there. So the mindfulness course, I might have got this wrong, but I think it's the 27th of February. Vicky will correct me. And it's between 7 and 8:30. I've reduced it to an hour and a half rather than 2 hours.